I want to introduce Gustav Gressel. Gustav, please, you have your floor. Not more than 5 minutes, I beg you, because we really want to ask some questions further. Please enjoy.
Yeah, I will be short because most of my comments that I wanted to hear were actually prevented by the US ambassador. I can only sort of add 2 points to the importance of judicial reform for the whole process. An independent judiciary that is a counterbalance to the government and is a great asset also on reforms and to reform implementation, because if people can go to an independent court, they can sort of correct the wrongdoings and lack of implementation of local officials or governmental officials on reforms if they've betrayed in their rights, if they have the confidences to go there. Just take the European example on the importance of that. If you want to cite a negative example, judicial reform in Bulgaria, unfortunately, very well managed to protect Soviet-style class of judges, and that till that day, despite of 10 years of EU membership, creates tremendous problems for Bulgaria for within. On the other hand, in Poland, you had a very successful judicial reform, even so successful that now the current government tries to rewind it because it has been successful. But this judicial reform also has been a great deal of Poland's economic success. Now, let us jump to EU accession. It's a difficult thing. The EU has not managed to define something in between of a DCFTA and a membership country. And the problem of the lack of defining this is now creating a sort of hollow space. Ukraine, yes, Ukraine has the right to apply for membership, but if you measure Ukraine on the benchmark of Copenhagen criteria, and especially on a strict sort of reading of the Copenhagen criteria, that process won't for now go very fast. On the other hand, there is an urgent need to have a flagship program to give the Ukrainians a clear signal that sort of there is on the way something you can achieve that sort of promotes or makes it easier to put pressure on vested interest groups to back down. Here, visa-free travel and the DCFTA were tremendous tools to facilitate reforms. You know, all these things are not values on its own. They're tools to facilitate reform, and they've been great. But now that they're in place, you need a kind of new flagship project, and a kind of pre-candidate status would be great for Ukraine, but at the time this is enormously difficult. On the populist surge and why this is difficult, the problem is that indeed the EU is still in a very difficult stage, and Macron's victory is not the end of the battle. The populist surge has done tremendous damage to the EU as such. You have to see how much, I mean, yes, the established forces have won back, but at some point they have won back because they have adopted tactics, language, and arguments of populist forces, which has eroded the seriousness of EU internal political debate. The second thing, it has eroded the credibility of EU public communication. 10 years ago, if the EU Commission would have launched a report on the progress of Ukraine's reforms that is so positive as it has done in December last year, that would have had a huge echo inside the EU, because the Commission is a credible, independent actor that evaluates Ukraine's reform process based on facts. Now nobody cares, because the delegitimization of governmental communication, because of the delegitimization of the EU and the Commission as an independent actor. And that is a huge problem for bringing forward the agenda. The second thing is we are stuck in a terrible quagmire with Turkey on EU accession, and that is poisoning the whole debate on further accession. Everybody knows that the policies Erdogan has put in place basically contradict EU accession. Still, because of sort of the strategic importance and because nobody wants to have Turkey sliding into Noverstan, the sort of accession is still on the agenda. But that is exploited again by the populists to say, you know, you say Ukraine, this is a fact-based accession process, this is a fact-based association process, but we see in Turkey that actually strategy and strategic geopolitical considerations are everything. So don't give us this narrative here that Ukraine will be different, and it's really hard to counter that. and it gives politicians quite a headache on how to frame the problem. On the narrative, just a short comment that everybody, I mean, at least in Germany, it's common sense that it's a Russian aggression against Ukraine. The problem is the narrative of Ukraine as a failed state has become much more prominent, and that is actually the real narrative front you have to counter. And at some point, unfortunately, all the domestic squabbles going on in Ukraine are doing an ill service to that. Just remember the smear campaign against your head of the National Bank, which has radiated all across Europe because certain oligarchs or members of parliament tied to certain oligarchs just sort of started to bubble nonsensical disinformation in European capitals. If you have such friends, you don't need the enemies in the Kremlin. And sort of the last point to the sovereignty issue, and that is the next headache for Europe. Sovereignty and territorial integrity are basically a right entitled to every state under the European security order, regardless of how successful they are in reform. Let us imagine the Russians invade Belarus because they have a squabble with Lukashenko. I mean, Lukashenko is not our friend and he's not a Democrat, but Belarus is still entitled to territorial sovereignty and integrity, and we should protect them. And Belarus will never become a member of NATO or the EU in current circumstances, but still it's their right. Unless they behave on the Milosevician style, they are entitled to that. And neither the EU nor NATO nor Washington has yet found an answer how to state that clear to Moscow. And
Thank you, Gustav. That's very precise, I would say. Thank you for that.